Good afternoon, everyone. Let the record show that there's a quorum present, and I call the meeting back to order at 1:37. Um, this afternoon, we're going to be dealing with the chairman of the Health Services Authority Board in relation to the Health Services Authority 2014 financial statements and some input from the Auditor General on the financial statements ended 30th of June 2015. Could I ask the sergeant to bring the chairman of the board in, please? You trained him good, though. Good afternoon, sir, and thank you for coming. As you know, we'll be dealing with the financial statements of the Health Services Authority for the 30th of June 2014, with some additional input from the Auditor General in regards to the 30th of June 2015 financials. Um, the rules require that when we ask you the first question, you state your name and position for the record. So I guess I would invite you to tell us how a board meeting functions and how it's conducted, how decisions are made.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jonathan Tibbetts, Chairman of the HSA Board of Directors. How the general board meetings happen are the schedule, of course, is set up by between the CEO and myself, with agenda items also placed onto the agenda through meetings ahead of time. These agenda items would come from the various subcommittees that are also chaired by board members, including the clinical subcommittee, the finance subcommittee, the audit subcommittee, the IT subcommittee, and the HR subcommittee. If there are any other business items as well, would be placed on the agenda. Board is, of course, would have to be quorate, and that would mean a number of at least 4 directors in attendance at the board meeting, along with invited guests such as the CEO and others, depending on the agenda items. So basically, we meet once a month, and we discuss the business of the organization, policies and procedures only. We do not get into operational matters. That's not what the board is intended to serve, and we strictly stick to the policy and procedures of the HSA.
And those policies and procedures as related to financial matters would contain such things as levels at which the executive can spend money in either capital or current within the budget provisions. Are there sorts of limits and what they can do without board approval and what has to come to the board?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. There are limits set by the finance director and approved by the board, by the entire board, as to how much the executive can spend. Right now, the level is actually very low at $10,000. Anything above that must come to the board or a finance subcommittee for approval, and then it goes up to $50,000, and then on up to $250,000 for the CTC, of course. So
The in an instance like that, the administrative arm would come into the board meeting, make a presentation with all the bells and the whistles, and then you make a decision after that, or
yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, how it works is basically the procurement department would prepare documentation for whatever item or whether it's equipment or services, whatever is being purchased. All the supporting documentation would be provided, along with options as far as possible vendors. If there are no other vendors, of course, then we have to realize that as well. In the medical field, there can sometimes only be one vendor for a particular item, so we have to be aware of that. We always try to cross-shop everything to try to get the best value for dollar and make sure that the organization, ultimately the patient benefits from the procurement process.
The summary provided by the Auditor General for the committee indicate expenses growing substantially every year, except for 2014 when there was a $7 million reduction in expenses, and but it has gone from 77 million in 2010 to 106 million 3rd of June 2015. What kind of justification has been given to the board for that kind of growth and expenditure over that period of time, and does it involve what is the reason for the increase? New services or
But Mr. Chairman, what we've done is introduce several new services, including bariatric services and whatnot, with the HSA. One of the things that the board of directors set in place back in 2014 is that no new service can be added without a justification for a profit cause. So, if we were to add a new service, the management would have to prove to the board that that service would be profitable to the organization. So while costs and expenses have gone up, so would the profit as well. Some items are cost neutral, which we would look at on a case-by-case basis depending on the need for the patients. However, the justification for any new expenses would have to show that it is a profitable endeavor.
are you comfortable then that revenue would have grown correspondingly if you require justifications for new services, and if new services is the reason for additional expenditure?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. We are comfortable in that. I think our latest financials also show, even with the increase that we've done recently, along with the other government statutory authorities for the cost of living adjustment and whatnot, that we were at a profit in the last year, and not doing bad at all when it comes to balancing the books and as far as the profit versus the costs and expenses go.
Yeah, because if we just look at 14-13, expenses were basically increased a lot more than revenue. The revenue for 2014 seems to be 80 million, and the expenses for 2014 is 92 million.
Right, but included in there, you'll notice for the government programs, the revenue would be basically, from my understanding, outside of the normal government programs, and therefore the overall profit would be reasonable within the 3.5 million there stated.
I guess the curious thing from my standpoint is that the 1 year in that period that expenses went down is the 1 year you made a profit. Did those expenses require any reduction in service to produce that profit, or?
I am not sure of what would have reduced the specific expenses. As something we can get to you as to why the expenses dropped so much that year. But that is something because that I know.
The reason I asked that question, because if you look at 2015, it has gone, expenses have gone back up even more than what they were in 2013. They've gone from 92 million in 2014 to 106 million in 2015.
Right, and that's directly related to the increase in services that we're now providing. Okay. And in general, the cost of healthcare has increased. We know that.
Mr. Chairman, through you, in terms of we heard earlier from the CEO about the self-insurance, and from a board perspective, have you considered that approach and taken advice from the necessary professionals, and it, do you agree with that line of self-insurance?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. At the time the decision was taken to do self-insurance, the board, which I believe was in 2010, looked at opportunities to do an outside or third-party insurance, which time it would have been cost prohibitive for several reasons. One also being that that would be a monthly premium that they would have to pay, whereas the self-insurance could have fluctuated and given us a little bit of leeway when it came to our cash expenses at the time. So one of the things that this current board has done is started the process to look into doing an insurance program. In fact, in the last 2 weeks, Cineco has sent a request to state that they are interested in doing a full and comprehensive insurance program for all of the staff at the HSA, which we will enter into negotiations and talks with them. It would have to be a tender process, though, I do believe, because it is going to be over $250,000 for the premium, I'm certain. And in so doing, we can do away with the self-insurance if that is what is deemed to be most profitable for the organization at this time.
Do you consider that one of the key components of that RFP would be post-retirement health insurance? And because my experience is that there's not a lot of companies in the island that offer that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, you're absolutely right, and I think that would have to be a key component in it. Right now, the HSA cannot be attractive to many people in the fact that after you retire, you have 3 months of coverage, and that's it. So that would be one of the key components that we look at post-retirement benefits, whether they're full as the civil service offers or partial. That would be questionable and determined at the time of the RFP.
Mr. Chairman, through you, in that, again, these are some questions that I had that came from this morning's witnesses, and talked about going after accreditation. Right? And I'm trying to see what the benefits are for basically what's a local provider with majority local clientele, mostly government. I mean, when you look at the revenue source, it's significantly government. What the impetus and the reasoning behind accreditation is for these services. Just seeing that such a closed loop type scenario.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. If we look at it in any other perspective, you would take whether it's your car or whatever, to a certified dealer. You wouldn't take your new vehicle to some mechanic perhaps that doesn't have any kind of qualification or certification. And similarly so with the healthcare field, the last thing you want to do is have an insurance company say, we're not going to send you to the HSA because you're not accredited. Basically, it's a standard that certifies where we're already at. We know that we provide excellent health care, but it's just that simple stamp of approval saying they meet a standard and we ensure that they adhere to that standard. Similarly, things like light bulbs, you want to make sure they're UL listed or whatever to make sure that that you don't end up buying a product that is second class. So we want to make sure that insurance companies, that the public, everybody has an understanding that an accreditation is not saying that you radically change everything you've done. More so is saying we're verifying, we're certifying that everything you're doing is right and is up to a standard that's worldwide. Anywhere in the world, whatever type of accreditation it is, I believe we're actually looking at the JCI accreditation. Wherever you go and you know that stamp of approval is on there, because we must realize that we also have tourists that get off cruise ships and have medical emergencies or are here visiting, and then the insurance companies, whether they're Cineco or not. Cineco is going to start looking at that. They're under new management the last few years, and they're going to start looking at, well, can we actually send our patients to the HSA because they're not accredited? So it is of vital importance to us to go ahead and get the accreditation. Again, most of the things that are being done are already on their requirement list, and we're up to the standard. Most of the matter of paperwork or streamlining a few of the services that we offer to make things up to where they would like to see the paperwork system or the, not necessarily the paperwork, but the processes happening the way they would like to see it happening. So it's not that we're doing anything wrong right now, but you know, accreditation has a certain number of requirements or a certain way requirements should be met, and that's what we're looking forward to doing. We feel that within 18 to 24 months, we can meet full accreditation for the entire organization.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, through you, just to continue on, I guess in my mind, I was trying to figure out what the difference is in both price and also brand, so to speak, versus the affiliation route and the accreditation route. Because if and I just kind of show you my line of thinking is that if you were affiliated with somebody that was accredited, who went through the process to onboard you, that part and parcel would kind of come together. So they would only, through their assessment, they would decide whether or not you're to their standard if they're already an accredited body, and you know, mark you off as such, and just what the difference in cost were, or why that one or the other route was chosen.
Okay, thank you for the question. Through you, Mr. Chairman. We're looking at millions of dollars in difference. If we hire someone who has the accreditation process already under their belt, as far as an individual that can take us, the entire organization, through it, you know, we're talking maybe a couple $100,000, $500,000 at most for us to begin the process and actually end up being accredited. If we do an affiliation with an organization that is accredited, we're looking anywhere from $5 to $14 million. So the board thought it, and in council with the ministry, thought it more financially prudent to go ahead and look at doing it internally rather than bringing in an outside organization. Also remember, when you bring in an outside organization, the good and the bad come. So even though an organization may be accredited, there are times when accredited organizations have issues as well, and can end up tarnishing an otherwise stellar reputation through the affiliation.
You are aware of basically, Joe, you are the 4 areas that Auditor General identified for several years now. Are you satisfied that enough is being done by the administration on a timely basis to make those corrections?
Mr. Chairman, you put in the words there, timely basis, and that's certainly something that we've all had issues with over the past several years in dealing with. One of the things that the current board under my leadership has done is basically put some heat on the fire to get things moving quickly. Sometimes there is a little resistance from the management because there are drastic changes that are happening. I will say that the directions that are being given to the management now seem to be followed to the T, and so we do feel that the processes, the action plans that have been put in place, they are meeting the timelines. They are ensuring that the action plans are being comprehensively followed. What I've noticed from previous directives is part of it would happen, but not completely. And so one of the things we've done now is every single board meeting, whether general or subcommittee meeting, has an action log. And some of these logs are going back 5 years from even the previous board. And we are going through and checking off whether the directives have been completed. And these are available through either FOI or any request for the minutes, of course, are available. But anybody is welcome to see the action items from as far back as anything that is left open and incomplete. And so we're going through identifying each one. And in some cases, there are over 100 action items that haven't been touched. But our board is going through them through the subcommittees and identifying and clearing up the ones that have been completed, looking at those that haven't been completed, why they're not completed, how can we get them sorted out, and moving on. So I do think that a lot of intensive work is going into the details from even previous years, but also planning ahead for the new action items such as the bad debt or doubtful debt, is what it really is doubtful debt. Through addressing that, we'll be able to issue the directives and get delivered outcomes in a timely manner.
Well, the reason I ask in a timely manner is because we're talking about the 2014 audit, and we were told this morning that they hope to be in compliance by 2018. That's a 4-year period, which in my view seems an awful long time to make
Right.
the corrective measures that need to be made.
Mr. Chairman, I'll say this, under promise and over deliver. That's the goal of the HSA. So we're going to under promise and tell you it'll be 2018 and we'll see what happens.
Well, under promise and over deliver don't mean a thing to me.
But when you have it on your table, sir, it will be.
Because I can tell you, and I can warn you, that the PAC is beyond this idea that the Auditor General keeps reporting the same thing year after year after year after year, and we keep getting promises and under-delivered, because if they were over-delivered, the Auditor General wouldn't have to report on the next year. Because we see the concerns of the Auditor General, things that we would expect that would be implemented during the next financial year after the audit, so that the corrective measures are made in a timely manner. So we'll see.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, you're exactly right, and that's one of the things that my board has addressed as action items. Like I said, that they be completed and signed off on. It's not a frivolous activity to say to the senior management that these items have to be looked at. That's asking for nothing. We've put strict deadlines on every single action item, and they must be reported back to on whether they're completed or what is the progress on it. And if they're not completed, who's responsible for not completing them, and what action is being taken against that person or to assist that person if the case be.
Does the board put priority on stuff? Because from where we sit, I think it's safe to say that patient service fees and patient-related accounts receivables and stuff are much more important to us than getting some foreign body to accredit you.
You're absolutely right.
And I would be concerned that resources that should be addressed to the concerns of the Auditor General may be being redirected to these other
Frivolous.
well, they're not
Perhaps,
frivolous, but I would
perhaps.
hope that, as you said earlier, most of this joint accreditation stuff you're already meeting.
Right.
Because my knowledge base indicates that we were already meeting the standards of Pan American Health Organization, World Health Organizations, and I've been in the business long enough to know that most of this accreditation is basically you pay for it, you get it, and it's more a political process than it is an actual healthcare delivery process.
Yes, sir. You're absolutely right. And that's exactly what the board has done. We looked at the biggest shortfalls when it came to our revenue. We saw that we were losing the most money in pharmacy. I think it was $5 million roughly per year in pharmacy. And that's the first place we attacked when it came to the payment policy and actually capturing the revenue that was or should have been generated from it. And so you are well aware of this payment policy being implemented in January. Phase 2 of the payment policy now is going to move into other areas and departments of the hospital. And we're starting a soft rollout in October, again to have a hard launch in January of 2017 for the next phases. But it is a public awareness process that has to happen, so the public isn't just kind of blindsided. Well, I'm going to the public hospital, I have to pay, which should have been the case all along because you're providing a service and there has to be a fee for that service. So we are moving along with our phased approach into the entire organization, so that hopefully by the end of 2018, as the CEO would have alluded to, the entire organization would be as strong as possible when it comes to collecting and capturing all the revenue that's being generated. And we're not giving away services. Regardless of who the person is, we want to provide health care for them. But the reality is someone has to pay for it somewhere. And the HSA has never been and will never be a financial institution. as such for lending, and so we should not look at it as that. And that's a change of mindset perhaps for a lot of the staff, but it's something that the board is pushing heavily. We don't have an interest rate that we can charge like the banks do, and we don't want to get into that. If there's a service provided, there must be a fee for it, and there must be revenue collected for that service.
You must be advising the banks because they forgot about interest rate and they never charge fee for service for everything under the sun. But we were informed this morning that there has been quite a number of years that an actual costing of the services has not been done. And I wonder if you have concerns that the charges are not reflective of what is actual costing.
Mr. Chairman, we absolutely, and when I say we, the entire board does have concerns with that. It is an action item for the senior management to look into. In fact, in our upcoming retreat, that is one of the main issues that we're going to look at. One of the things that the finance director feels has been happening is we basically been providing services and charging at ancient rates compared to what they're actually costing us. And we do feel that we are losing money in many areas.
This is a retreat to come because it was indicated this morning that such an application was made to the board, but it wasn't supported from management to do the detailed cost analysis that needed to be done.
I believe that was mentioned that in the past that had been done. That was a previous board, not this current board. And this retreat is happening the first week of October. And so it is something by cost center, we're looking at where are our losses and where can we cut expenses as well.
The other matter that is of concern to us is the legal aspect of non-compliance with cash reserves and what like that. What is the board doing to?
Well, Mr. Chairman, a lot of the issue with illegal compliance as far as the 90-day reserve goes, a lot of it is cash flow and how things happen. Sometimes we're above it, sometimes we're below it. And at the end of the year, of course, you just so happens that you're below it because everything has to be paid up at that time. It's something that we are going to be discussing with Cabinet to see if it can be a floating number of days based on cash flow. If you look at the average over the year, we would have been close to the 90 days, but depending on when the year ends, we could end up in a bit of a shortfall there. So we don't want to break any laws, so we need to look at the fact that depending on when the money comes in, insurance settlements and so forth, sometimes, we don't get paid insurance payments for 6 months after the year end, even though you're expecting it to be there at the time. So,
yeah, one of the curious things I found was that at year end, I'm trying to find the actual figure now, but somewhere along the line, under note 5, you have a figure there that says receivable from Cabinet, 2.6 million. Is that an administrative procedure that didn't get completed by the year end, or is that funds that Cabinet refused to pay based on applications being made?
Mr. Chairman, I would have to get more insight on that. I am not exactly abreast of what those funds were given for.
What is the means of communication between the board and the ministry?
The board and the ministry have several lines of communication. The chief officer, myself, and the councillor, myself, along with the deputy chair, meet on a quarterly basis. So we have open discussion at all times. However, we actually have formal meetings every 3 months to ensure the direction of the HSA is going the way that the ministry would like to see it go. Through meetings with the ministry feels as though the board is the representation for the ministry, and therefore the ministry doesn't have anyone outside of the board basically sitting on it. the communication line between the councillor and myself, between the chief officer, myself, the CEO, the deputy chair is a very open one. We talk very regularly. Email correspondence happens numerous times a day.
Watch them emails.
Yeah. Well, I'm very cautious with all my emails. I don't have them on private servers, and I don't plan to run for president of the United States anytime.
Well,
So.
apparently some don't function around here so good either. If you believe what you see in the media. But and those quarterly meetings or formal meetings, minutes are kept, and I was looking for the section in the law that said the ministry could issue directives to the board in the interest of public policy after the consultation with the board. Has any of that happened during your tenure?
Mr. Chairman, to my knowledge, the board had been issued a number of directives several years ago, and then we continue to get updated directives. And then in some cases, we have been given formal directives from the ministry to look at it. So yes, sir, that has happened.
Mr. Chairman, through you, in terms of all the systems of internal controls, you said you have a action item list, etc. Can you identify to us the top 5 in there, or would you have that information? What does the board think that it should be doing sooner rather than later, and has a priorities list of that 100 plus action items been done?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, first of all, the number one priority has been to get a clean opinion. That has been the number one priority of the board, as well as to meet the directives that have been issued by the ministry. Other than that, how we go about doing that and so forth, those are items we're going to address at our second annual retreat, which is coming up here in the next few weeks, like I mentioned, and we will, as a board, prioritize. We do have some new board members. They may have some insight that we perhaps weren't thinking about. When you get down in the trenches, sometimes you can't see the big picture, and so we're very thankful for the fresh set of eyes that are coming on board with us. But to give you a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, number 1 and 2, of course, would be a clean opinion, and number 2 would be to deal with the directives from the ministry, which would include things like bad debt and so forth. So to give you a specific breakdown of the 5, I can't give that to you at this point, but we can get those. And then of the action items, from the various minutes, those would be directives or decisions made in board meetings that have not either not finished or been signed off to be completed. And they're, like I said, they're available in any of the minutes that we submit for the ministry.
The legislation provides for the establishment of a health foundation to the Cayman Islands Health Services Authority. I would assume that the purpose of that foundation would be to allow donations of capital. The Tibbets putting up the cancer center, the Millers putting up the arena center. Have you made any request of the ministry to action the establishment of this foundation?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that the foundation, in one way, shape, or form, is already in place, and we do receive funding. The CEO could probably speak to that better because she actually sits on it, and through the board, she informs us of the various donations that are being given through the different foundations. I don't think there's one specifically called Health Foundation, but I believe that there are others that have been set up that allow them to donate.
No, the law authorizes the establishment of the Cayman Islands Health Foundation. That's what I'm talking about.
I'm not aware of one specifically called the Cayman Islands Health Foundation, no, sir.
Which the members are appointed by cabinet.
Okay.
The committee shall consist of 7 members appointed by the governor and cabinet, by the governor and cabinet, sorry, but no person shall be a member of the committee if he is a director, the holder of an office, and the minister responsible for health, or an employee of the authority. So
I'm not aware.
certainly the CEO couldn't be sitting on this.
No, but the
foundation.
CEO would be invited to say, what does HSA need? And I think, pardon?
No, but I thought you indicated that the foundation that you were aware of, she sat on the board of the foundation.
Oh no, I know that she's invited to various meetings. I don't even recall the name of the foundation, but there are foundations that she's invited to attend, so that she can state the needs of the HSA. I know things like ambulance equipment and so forth. She has been able to get from the various foundations, the Heart Health Fund and some of the other ones.
But I think there are more things like service clubs.
Right.
That-
But I don't know of. I don't know of the Cayman Islands Health Fund Association or organization, as you mentioned there.
maybe the councillor we can put you on the spot.
No, sir, I'm not aware of it either, to be honest with you.
Well, I happen to be aware of it because I was very much involved in making a recommendation, and my concern is that we're always looking for ways to improve the Health Services Authority, and the whole idea behind this health foundation would be that you could, as do most private hospitals as well as government hospitals, invite foundations, particularly for capital development and introduction of new services, and the foundation funds those, right?
Right.
So I'm rather disappointed to hear that it hasn't been established.
Mr. Chairman, I think that would be up to cabinet to establish, not.
Yeah,
not the board.
I agree that's what I was asking if.
Yeah, no, I'm not aware of it.
Okay,
No, sir.
so we'll make it in one of our recommendations, but
Sure.
it would be something that, but you chairman of the board, and you don't know what's in the HSA law?
I don't have the HSA law sitting in front of me, sir. But
because it's supposed to table reports and all that sorts of stuff, and
but it appears that it hasn't been set up by cabinet as yet. So
no, and I am aware of at least one family that wanted to do something similar to this several years ago and wasn't allowed to do it because we didn't have this facility.
Okay.
And I'm also aware that the HSA has had to recently invest substantial funds into what they wanted to do. And once you get one family to do one, then it becomes
exactly
a competition, so to speak. That's not the right word, but you know what I mean.
Yes, sir. You're absolutely
But both Ottawa wants to be in lights.
Yeah.
So we'll make a recommendation that this be progressed. But I think it is very important. The other question is in looking, how much does the board look at what's happening at the HSA and ask for proposals from the administration, for instance, the ambulance service? Does the board, or has the board at any time asked the management of the HSAs to do a cost-benefit analysis of having that privatized or
Mr. Chairman, not to my knowledge. We have been approached by a private ambulance company in the past. There were many issues involving getting the cooperation of the private with the HSA. A lot of things that are in the law, perhaps that the private company did not realize were in there regarding medical directors and on-call staff and so forth, insurance coverage and all the requirements were not able to be met as far as my knowledge. There was an attempt for a short period of time to work in conjunction with the HSA, but from what I understand, the company has closed down at this point in time. To answer your question perhaps a bit more, I personally met with the owner of the company along with the medical director when I was asked to by cabinet to meet with this gentleman, and there seemed to be the idea that everybody that rides in the ambulance pays for the ambulance, and not realizing that there is also a lot of bad debt that can go along with ambulance encounters. So once they understood that, it's not an extremely profitable situation, I think that perhaps changed their outlook on it. And of course, it ended up being exactly as we stated, in that they were unable to maintain the organization or the company.
The note 10 in the accounts, I don't think that you were chairman of the board at the time, but the board made a decision in 2011 to buy a block of apartments for $990,000 to provide temporary housing for locums and visiting specialists. Does the board require the administration to in its reporting to determine at what point staff levels will be to where you don't need locums? And the second part of the question would be, I am aware that there are a number of Caymanians who would like to further develop themselves as doctor by getting board certification, but they're not being encouraged to do so by being offering funds or scholarships to do it.
Okay. To answer the first part of your question, the closest that the board would require from the management would be to state the number of Caymanians within the organization and how many are being hired versus foreigners or work permit holders. And so in doing that, we can get a good determination for whether we're actually making progress towards Caymanizing the staff or not. To answer your question regarding the Caymanians wanting scholarships, I know that the organization has pushed very hard to increase our funding for scholarships, especially, only to Caymanians, and also working with University of West Indies, I believe it is, to increase our number of Caymanians attending for specialization, to be able to get them back into the HSA and basically Caymanianize our doctor staff or clinical staff. The comment that was made to the board recently was that we have too many Caymanian doctors coming back. We don't actually have positions available for all of the doctors. And I say this in a way because, remember, GPs are fairly easy to find, but they do have to go on to do the specialization. So a lot of them want to come back as a GP, but there are only so many GP positions available, and we do need to go on, as you stated, to get the specializations that are needed to fit into the organization. But absolutely, when a Caymanian doctor returns with specialization, they're put into the succession plan, which has been established by our HR subcommittee, and they are put into place and work under the mentorship of the current doctor to replace that doctor upon such time as they're able to. That has actually happened only this year, the succession planning for the clinical staff at the HSA.
There's so much that troubles me about what you just said that we could take the rest of the evening to talk about it. But of greater concern for me is that, 10 years ago, when you got your MBBS, you were basically considered a general practitioner. In today's medical environment, largely because of the influence of technology, as opposed to symptomatic diagnosis and treatment, a GP qualification now is simply an entry level for specialization.
Absolutely.
And it gives me great concern that the Ministry of Health, the board of the HSA, and the administrator of the HSA is not making adequate provisions to ensure that Caymanians get the opportunity to specialize. And I think that's troubling.
To my knowledge, Mr. Chairman, we are pushing for Caymanian specialization, and I know that the medical director himself has worked along with four in particular Caymanian doctors for their specialization, including giving advice, because as you stated, an MBBS now basically is a very basic degree, even though most of us would never have one. is a very basic degree when it comes to clinical work. And so if they don't have a specialization, it's very little they can do because we already are full of Caymanian GPs. So they would need this to the extent. I mean, there may be an occasional on vacation where we bring in a locum, but
Has what efforts has the board made? Has the board reached out to other countries like Canada, other Caymanians who are in established positions overseas, who can help these people, and oftentimes many of these countries are willing to train people, particularly from the West Indies, at very concessionary rates.
right. I haven't personally, but I do know that the medical director has reported that he's reached out through England and Jamaica for training of Caymanian staff, and we do an exchange program where we train some of their staff, and that's basically how
But
it
that
works.
would only be prior to the MBBS.
No, this could be for the specialization. It could be a Caymanian doctor, for example, that has a GP and just does even private practice, but they want to do a specialization at this point. I know there is a young lady or a lady that is a doctor, and she's looking at doing specialization through the medical director. She's been able to do her internship in Jamaica and get the specialization she was seeking through the funding of the HSA. So there are plans, and I know we've written to Cabinet and the Ministry to request an increase in funding. I don't think that had been granted at this time, but we have written to request an increase in funding for the internship program to get more Caymanians certified.
Because my information has it, well, you said they dealt with 2 or 4, that there were at least 10 for some time, some of them as long as 5 or 6 years, and we probably have another 10 or more that's about to come back.
19 in total, sir.
Yeah, well, I understand the urgency
Of
now
course, absolutely.
in addressing this issue. And can I recommend? Well, I better not do that. But I would personally, and I'll say this publicly, I would recommend you sell these apartments immediately and fund the specialization of Caymanians.
Well, I mean, if we
Because
sell,
that could do that. Even if you had a fire sale from him, you might get a 500,000. Could, in the right environments, could provide quite a bit of specialized training, because the risk is that if the Caymanians have to go to other countries and get citizenship and all this in order to access training, and what you're doing is planning for these people not to come back and you're assisting with a bleeding dream that the country can't afford.
no, that's absolutely not the intention. The intention is for them to get experience outside the Cayman Islands, and where they can see perhaps a wider variety of occurrences or situations, and have the knowledge of things that might not even happen here. We don't have obviously all the infrastructure of other places in the world, so they will get experiences from those other countries that they would never even get here. And then when they return here, they can say, I have that on my resume. I've been able to do this in the past. I may need a refresher course perhaps, but this is what's available to me. We absolutely are working on increasing a budget. I spoke to Dr. Jefferson because he works with the budget for the internship and scholarship program. And along with the Education Council, we've had several meetings with the Education Council to get an increase in budgeting for specialization for our Caymanian doctors. We want to Caymanianize our clinical staff 100%. And again, we have to get reports at the board meetings as to how many Caymanians were hired each month. And if the number is outweighs, obviously in many cases it will be outweighed by work permit or foreign workers. The succession plan is now in place so that we can see within, depending on the level of job, how many years it'll be before we can replace that person with a Caymanian. So those are all in place at the HSA. Like I said, the HR subcommittee just finished the succession planning program and put it in place. And so at any point we can look and see these are how many foreign workers we have, these are how many Caymanian. These are when the foreign workers will either be replaced or retire, and we'll replace them with a Caymanian.
As I understand, locums, you're using locums to replace doctors who go on vacation or who fall sick or stuff like that.
Right, yes, sir,
The question that I was asking was not about locals, but
No,
about locums, and at what point does the board expect the HSA to be at a staff level that locums are not necessary? Because traditionally, I don't know about today, but locums is a very expensive alternative for staff.
I can't say that we will ever be 100% locum free, so to speak, because one thing that happens with the doctors in order to keep up their clinical certifications is our own doctors, in fact, take their vacation time and go to other hospitals and work in other hospitals as well to increase their certification or to maintain certification, because like I said earlier, many times they don't get the experiences here that they could get in other parts of the world. And our doctors do that, and we do an exchange with other countries and other hospitals to get the experience. I would have to look at the cost of our locum or the expenses for our locums to see where we're at. But I think it is a reciprocal situation where we will trade with another institution for a very similar price. So it's not cost neutral because we're obviously paying, but at the same time we're getting value for dollar because our own staff are being trained and recertified in other institutions.
Are you aware of any plans for the 1.53 acre piece of land that was purchased, and what are the board's plans for that piece of property?
Mr. Chairman, years ago, again before I came on the board, there was a master facility plan drawn up in which the 1.53 acre plot of land across the street was going to be used for a specialist clinic. That is still on the table. We are going to be addressing that, however, at the upcoming retreat, because we need to know if that's actually what we need now. That master facility plan was done in 2010. It's 6 years old and probably a little bit outdated, to say the least. So we need to see what is actually most beneficial for our patient base. If it's a specialist clinic, then we will pursue that. But we do need to reevaluate it. It right now is being used as a overflow car park for our staff.
Does that indicate that there's unlikely to be any plans in the foreseeable future to move the facility out of the flight path and other safety concerns that people have?
You're referring to the entire organization? There are no plans to move it at this time.
Mr. Chairman, through you, just again, going, not to delve on the subject, but the medical internships. In terms of that accreditation, does that tie into that at all? Meaning that you have to show that the succession plan, the training, the specializations, or is that something that's totally outside of that process?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to my knowledge, we actually have to maintain a certain number of interns from other institutions in order to meet the accreditation requirements.
But not your own, meaning putting in a program that in line with the succession planning and accreditation, possibly, where people come in, they get a government scholarship, they know that if they come back and they've achieved all these things, then as a Caymanian, they're going to get some sort of the internship is part of and parcel of that package, the succession planning, and if they're competent, able, capable, all the above, then there's a trajectory, a plan for them.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that's exactly what it means that we do. When we receive interns from other institutions, the agreement is that they will accept some of our interns in order that they can maintain their accreditation as well, or their I believe CPAM is one of the organizations that we make sure that the requirements are met for, and we put our Caymanian doctors on a succession plan now to say, okay, you've just returned, They meet with the medical director. This is where we can fit you in. This is, if this is an area of specialization that you're interested in, that's where we want you to work on. These are the steps for you to receive those. Sometimes the Cayman doctors do not want to hear it. To be honest, we've had a rejection from one of the doctors who said, "I'm not interested in that path for my future. I'd rather do this," and they take the path themselves. Obviously, there has to be some sort of middle ground that's met, but we have to look at what's available. As you said, if we look at succession planning, if we have a Caymanian doctor who just came into a position and another Caymanian doctor wants to go into that exact same position, they may have to realize that it could be a long period of time that they wait. Like I said, the internship program is critical for both us and our Caymanian doctors. It has to be where we can send our doctors to other institutions to train. We would not want to only have our doctors trained at the local hospitals here. That would be a very, very disastrous situation for the HSA. They will not see the range of accidents or occurrences that they would in other places. And if they're faced with a new situation, they may not know how to handle it if they were only trained here.
The standards required for accreditation, are they not going to limit the number of interns you have and require a greater number of specialization? Accreditation is not going to promote, because assuming you're talking about interns, that I'm talking about people who are in training for board specialization, the accreditation standards are going to require you to have a certain number and maintain a certain number of board certified specialists as opposed to interns. The accreditation is not going to require you to have a specific amount of interns or allow you to have interns above a certain amount.
No, you have to maintain the number of specialized directors and not directors, sorry, doctors. And from my understanding of what we were told is that the accreditation wants to show that you have a training program in place for interns as well. So, these interns may well be doctors in their own jurisdiction, but they would have to get experience at another institution. And so we would be that institution. We have to show that we have a training program in place to be accredited. If we don't, then I don't remember the wording of it, but to the extent that it's showing that we're not a model institution where we can actually train doctors. And like I said, the idea is that we train them, our own doctors in another area or another jurisdiction, so that they get the experience. And likewise with doctors from other jurisdictions, they come to us to get different experiences. But there is a maintenance level for the internship program.
And my final question on that topic was that does the board then sit down and do a kind of a general assessment of needs and then telegraph that to young Caymanian doctors, i.e. we have no one in this area that's Caymanian, we've got work permits or whatever else for these areas. These are the areas that we're kind of offering the scholarships for. If you want to kind of do your own thing, know that you have to do it, but you're not going to get in this priorities list. I mean, is it that detailed? Or
through you, Mr. Chairman, the CEO has met with the Education Council since I've been the board chairman on 2 occasions to yearly to give them the list of priorities for HSA.
I do have some questions, but on another matter, sir. So if you all want to continue with what you're... Okay. Chairman, through you to Mr. Tibbetts. We spent quite a bit of time this morning talking with CEO and the CFO with regard to this sort of thorn in the flesh of the HSA, and that is the growing receivables and the provision for bad debts. And we've seen just, some of it's grown over the years, and CEO this morning admitted some of those debts are well over 10 years old, probably. What's hindering the board from actually coming to grips with this issue and trying to get these items written off the books? I mean, it looks to me like they've been provided for. Why not just write them off?
Well, that is exactly what we're doing through you, Mr. Chairman. Is exactly what we're doing. Currently, we're going through a process of evaluating which debts can be written off. As you said, anything 5 years and older, basically, we know that we can write off because it's beyond doubtful at that point. So we are going through that process. At which time the CFO will bring to the board and the finance subcommittee the write-off requests from the organization. It's something that is needed because it's dragging on our books and actually making the organization not get a true picture and be able to tackle the current doubtful debts appropriately. So it is being done at this time that we are going through the bad debts.
I know that we're past June 30th, but are some of these write-offs going to take place for the June 30th, 2016 year end, or are we looking at dealing with this prospectively?
I can't say for sure it would be by June 30th, 2016. It is something that the CFO was asked to do. I want to say it was in the April meeting of 2016 that she was given the directive to identify accounts for write-off. As for the deadline, I can't say it was June of 2016 because it is a lengthy process, as you can imagine. 10 plus years worth of receivables is not an overnight or even a 1 month process. But I will get an update on the deadline for that.
So fair to say at this point then nothing has come to the board for approval for write-off?
Not at this point, no, sir.
Okay. One question. Has the HSA adjusted its financial year to comply with government?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
And you go
18.
to a 2-year cycle too? Or
Right, we do an 18-month and then a 2-year afterwards.
So none of this will now happen then until sometime in 2018?
It would be December 2017 would be the cutoff.
That would be the time at which you would see it in the financial statements.
Right.
But, I mean, hopefully take place before then.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, sorry if I can just interject, just to be hopefully clear and helpful to the committee. We obviously don't want it misunderstood that financial statements will be prepared for a 2-year period of time. They will continue to be prepared for periods of time of 12 months. The budget appropriations in the future will cover a span of 2 years in total, and those appropriations themselves would be broken down into an appropriation for 12 months, followed by another appropriation for 12 months. But we don't want the public to misunderstand that financial statements will be prepared for 2 years and nothing in between.
Mr. Chairman, through you, just going back to the bad debts, in your understanding as chairman of the board, what power does the board have to draw the line in the sand and say, we as a board, having taken, our own expert advice, I assume that you have, people with financial backgrounds, accounting backgrounds on the board as well, and external advice, have decided that anything past X is going to be now a write-off, and then we start from this position going forward? Or do you have to go back to ministry, cabinet? Can you explain that process and what the board's role is in determining where to draw that line in the sand?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, through you, this year the board has been given the authorization to identify the bad debt and write it off. It was only as of this year that had happened. Previously, everything did funnel back through to the ministry, and a lot of times it was an issue of not getting a response at that time. However, this year we have been given the authorization to identify write-offs and do the write-off.
But when cabinet writes off medical debt, do you get a breakdown of what portion of that was debt at the HSA, or is that only overseas care that Cabinet writes off?
I am not sure which it would be. We have a breakdown of every penny that is owed, and the Cabinet is welcome to inspect that. I know as a chairman, I have brought to the minister in the past, or the previous minister actually, I brought to him an entire breakdown of the complete bad debt as listed, some 1,200 pages worth for his information and perusal. And it was at that point the discussion started taking place that this had to be addressed. And like I said, I've only received this year approval from councillor and ministry that we can go ahead. We're given the authorization to write off the bad debt. And upon the recommendation, I should say, of the ministry to go ahead with that.
And does that directive set in the guidelines, i.e., how many years?
Right, anything, Mr. Chairman.
That is an evaluation of the total existing debt to write off up to the total of that existing debt if you determine that it's uncollectible.
Mr. Chairman, there's basically the statute limitations as far as anything over 6 years. It's already known that that's uncollectible. So that's a given. And then we're also given the guideline to look at uncollectible. I mean, obviously, if some people have deceased, it's going to be next to impossible to collect. So anything over 6 years, we were given the directive that we can write off, and then anything that is uncollectible as well.
But is the board working on a policy then to have a bad debt write-off kind of manual, so that you go forward and you say, well, if it's past 3 years, or I mean, that's just me using that as an example, then we're just gonna hive that off and then go after the amounts that we think we can recover. Because this morning we heard from the CFO that amount was around $10 million, right? That it was perceived that you could go after. And I was just, again, curious as to, okay, where is that line, and or going forward, is there going to be some sort of formal board policy saying that not being able to bind future boards, but your board, as long as it's constituted, this is what we're going to do?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the board is actually looking at it in a proactive manner, in that we eliminate or significantly reduce bad debt. So the board is looking to put policies in place that would alleviate the stress of creating bad debt through collecting upfront, through pre-certification and so forth, in order to make sure that our patients are covered. We've gone as far as perhaps mentioned earlier today, that we have the needs assessment unit on board with us now, where we have 2 of their staff working full-time at the HSA in order to expedite the process of patients in need of care. So the board is trying to look at it from an alternate standpoint, that we put policies in place that doesn't allow bad debt to be created. We will obviously have to identify bad debt, because being a public health institution, that is going to happen regardless of how many policies and procedures and programs we have in place. It is going to happen from time to time. So it is something that we have to look at, but we are trying to identify ways to eliminate as much of the bad debt on a yearly basis as possible. We would like to be down around the 1% figure, as opposed to about 10% of the budget at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, through you, I know it's quite a bit of difference, but in note 5, it says in 2013 it was 533,000. This is the allowance for bad debts. And in 2014, it's tripled to 1.4 million. Is that because the bad debts has increased, or what's the reason for that? It's on page 19.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would assume that this is due to unfunded programs with government. I am not 100% sure. I would have to check that out, but that would be my assumption, that it's because of unfunded programs through government.
We keep hearing this unfunded program, but there is in this 18-month budget somewhere in the region of 50 plus million to fund these various programs. Are you suggesting that even with that amount that is provided in all those various subheads, that it is not enough to cover? And has the board, is the board involved in determining how much each of those categories or subheads in the budget is budgeted for?
Through you, Mr. Chair, or to you, Mr. Chair, the board does not get involved with the dollar figures as far as the amounts that are projected. That would be reported from the CFO, and based on history. My understanding is that there can be variations from year to year, and therefore supplements are then offered after the fact to allow us to collect this unfunded amount. I think over time, cabinet, in fact, government still owes the HSA a considerable amount of money that is being approved from time to time, but it does go back several years, from my understanding.
Mr. Chairman, just to try and help the committee as well, and to re-emphasize the point that you made at the very beginning, I just pick a few of the significant items from the current 16-17 budget that gives the relationship between the Ministry of Health and the HSA. The most individually significant budget item would be medical care for indigents. That's 16.5 million, as an example. Medical services in the BRAC and Little Cayman, 5.2 million. Ambulance services, 3.4 million. District clinics, 3.4 million. Mental health services, 3.4. There's about a dozen individual line items within the budget that defines this relationship between government and the provision of medical services. So I just wanted to give that information. I won't bore the committee with going through every single dozen lines or so, but the amounts are substantial, sir.
Yeah, and I don't know whether you're in a position to, I don't expect you to have it to hand, but maybe you could supply for the committee what the board regards as unfunded areas and services you provide that are not funded by government, or whether they are inadequately funded or...
Correct. Inadequately funded would be the correct word. It's commonly used as unfunded because it may go over the allowance for the indigent, for example, but we still have to take care of them. Remember, these are based on historical events, and when you have one event, for example, can be $500,000 in a matter of days. It's easy to get a $1.4 million unfunded as it's called, but inadequately funded is what it really is.
I guess the
underfunded would be the correct word.
The committee would be interested to see what the
we
board
can get that
believes are these categories that are unfunded and what that quantum.
Yeah, we've actually submitted to the ministry for funding for these. And like I said, from time to time, Cabinet will approve the funding and we will be able to collect on these amounts. We do have money going back as far as 2013 that is still uncollected that the ministry owes HSA.
Outside of these areas that the financial secretary...
Right, correct, the inadequately funded areas. We have submitted
that'll fall into your bad debt write-off now because of the number of years.
Well, it would show up here in other receivables. Correct.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much, sir, for coming, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you for having me. You too. The committee, just for the interest of the listening public, will write and table a report based on these hearings
we'd like to get that report tabled at the next meeting of the Legislative Assembly. Thank you all very much for coming.